Welcome to episode 2 of Confessions of a Bad Asian with me, your host, Betsy Lynn. These are the stories of people who have broken the unwritten rules that hold us back. And I'm proud that my rule maker and rule breaker today is veteran journalist Richard Louie. Richard has more than 30 years in broadcast journalism, film, technology, and business. Currently an anchor at MSNBC, NBC News, and previously with CNN Worldwide, Louie was the first AAPI male to anchor a daily national news show. The Team Emmy and Peabody winner is also the longest-serving AAPI male in the national anchor seat, now for almost 2 decades. Louie is seen as an authority on race and intersectionality and has spoken at over 500 community events related to gender, race, and equity over the last decade, and remains one of the longest-serving correspondents who has reported on communities of color without pause. Richard is the author of the best-selling and award-winning book, Enough About Me, as well as author of the groundbreaking Inclusion at Work Risk Reports released at Davos and South by Southwest. As a film director, he recently released the Oscars and Grammy qualifying documentaries Sky Blossom and Unconditional, which were honored with an unprecedented series of premieres at the White House, United States Congress, United Nations, and European Parliament. Richard's overlapping 20-year business career includes time at Citigroup, Oliver Wyman, Mrs. Fields Cookies, a fintech patent, and launching 6 tech brands over 3 business cycles. He has served on private and NGO boards in the gender equity and human trafficking sectors. In 2017, Richard founded a not-for-profit organization focused on action-based narrative change strategy. He is a volunteer and celebrity caregiving ambassador for the Alzheimer's Association, AARP, Plan International, Bright Focused, and Caring Across Generations. Richard Louie, thank you for being guest number 2 on Confessions of a Bad Asian, Conversations with Rule Makers and Rule Breakers. I see you as an incredible rule breaker in the world of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander world, as well as the world of the United States. I wanted to have this conversation with you because I think it's incredibly interesting how you grew up and how you decided to take the path that you're on right now. At some point, I'm going to take a pause and then read your entire bio. That's not going to happen right now because I don't have it in front of me. And it'd be a waste of your time because you already know what your bio is. That being said, I do want this to be a conversation around friends who do cool. You are doing some cool. So wanted to chat about why you decided to go into journalism, what some of those challenges were growing from the business background that you started out with, and then some of the challenges that you see right now.
All in 30 seconds. No.
You have more than 30 seconds, actually. You have way more than 30 seconds. In fact, you have 30 minutes.
I was thinking back when we first gathered so long ago.
Neil Yassib.
Yeah, Neil Itzeb. And we were both coming from different sides of the train tracks in that, here I was a journalist. You were on the political side. And
just to be clear, that was literally, that was my first, you're my first journalist that I talked to off the record. And I was like, there is absolutely no way I'm going to tell him anything. Because I wouldn't want to tell. I have zero trust with this dude. And no, I know anyone, but I'm representing my boss. How can I do that?
Yeah, that was so funny. You seriously were the consummate professional and we're on lockdown. And I was like, I'm just trying to hang and learn because I had just started my job, as you know, here at 30 Rock, and our focus on politics. I'm a non-opinion journalist. I was just trying to get an understanding of the lay of the land and how through those years we've come. I hope you've come to trust me, and
100%.
You, of course, for sure. And my goal about learning about our AAPI community and politics is nonpartisan. It is not about secrets. It's not about trying to get you. It is about an opportunity to make a difference. And you asked that question, and I couldn't help but go back to that moment where we started to discuss that, my objective while I didn't know what I was doing at that time, that's not that I know now, but I know a little bit more now after those years, is that I knew I needed to lean in on the opportunity to have better representation and better voice and better cultural understanding of our political foundation, our political history, and a political opportunity. And I mean this in a nonpartisan way, but this is about being part of a great democracy. And so how would I approach that? So when we were sitting down, that was the beginning of that journey. And now, 13 years later, here I am. And, as I sit where I'm sitting at 30 Rock and you're sitting in Washington, D.C., and I'm thinking, wow, how much when it comes to the idea of API politics or politics of color, that there's been so much change. That doesn't mean that there's no more to do, as you know very well, but there's been so much change and evolution. So I think that is part of what brought me to where I sit today. Otherwise, Betsy, as you know, in our discussions, I may have stayed at CNN. My job was fine. I was anchoring along, if you will, and the opportunities were right in front of me. They looked great. But what I didn't have was access to our political conversation in news. And I wanted that. I wanted to be able to be conversant so that when I could talk to people like you, even on lockdown, that we'd still be able to have some, this and that. But you remember.
How bad was that lockdown? That was me also having serious concerns around saying anything. That has changed significantly since then. You are being super kind around the lockdown. But how have those conversations changed for you, and why do you think that has changed? And part of that is, let's start there.
Yeah, I think back then, first of all, leadership in the House and the Senate has grown. And at that time, I don't know if you would say that there was this great experience or depth necessarily in the space of being able to position one community that did not have a voice. Now you would say they are well positioned, seasoned, and understand what they need. That doesn't mean, though, as you know very, very well, because this is your game, is that it doesn't mean, though, that you're achieving what you want. Just because you are seasoned, just because you are positioned, does not mean that you get what you want. So I think that's what I've seen. I've also seen, at least on our airwaves, that more commonly we will see politicians of color not having to talk about politics of color all the time.
Yeah.
That is a true barometer of progress. Not to say you eliminate it, just that you add it into the portfolio. And I saw that within my watch, and I had one panel, all AAPI, and we were not talking about AAPI politics. We weren't.
Amazing.
We were talking about the economy. And I was just like, or we're talking about a DOJ case. And I remember at the end of it, I was telling the panel, I was like, well, here we are, made a little bit of history today. There's 5 of us talking, and we didn't bring up the issue of AAPI politics once. There you go. Right. And
amazing.
I think that is just so great. It's like a fireworks moment.
So let's go back into the background of you. How did you become a journalist? Why did you decide this was important, and why focus on your longstanding career, which we will go into around why you focused on civil rights, humanitarian issues? Before you started doing that, you were in business. You've done a lot of different things in your life. And then there's this piece of why did you decide to go from what would be considered a good Asian career in business to journalism, which is, I think, I love seeing you on camera. Not sure parents typically love seeing. It's not the career that most immigrant parents and
yes,
parents that come from a background who care about stability think is a good career.
Yeah.
We'll say that because I also went into a career that is not considered a good Asian career.
Yeah. Forever worried. And it's really like, it's kind of like, is it Asian? Is it Latino? Is it Black?
Is it
immigrant? Right.
Yeah.
And, I think I'd boil it down to, are we living with an immigrant culture? I think I live in an immigrant culture way, or an immigrant way. I'm not an immigrant. My dad was not. My mom came when she was 2. So she's an immigrant. My grandparents, 2 or 3 of them came to America illegally. I'm a grandson of an illegal. And I say that for a reason. The reason why I use the word illegal is because, since we have the time to discuss that very idea, and it's important to me to bring it up, Betsy, because I only use it when I can explain it.
Yep.
And the reason why I say I'm a grandson of illegals is because of what that word has been used as, and the stereotypes that come and the images that come from the usage of that word. And they're not people that look like you and me. The propagation of the stereotype when you use the word illegal is of a certain group, and it's of our Latino Hispanic brothers and sisters, which is incorrect. As you know, the 1 million, 1 out of 10 roughly of those who are undocumented come from Asia. So when I learned that, I remember it was during a break at CNN, and I just did a story during the election about illegal immigration. And we went to break, and I was just sitting there and I was typing away, and I was like, holy Hannah, that story is about me, because my grandparents came here illegally. And I was really conflicted, right, wrong, me, not me, right? Similarities, comparisons of what we were. And I had learned that my grandparents had come to the country illegally when I was 14. So, 2 decades before, but I didn't process it as being equal, right, or similar. And I think those realizations have been what's driven part of the answer to your question, which is, as I've realized things, I've reacted in ways that, after some thought, that I've made a change. And one of those realizations, the coming of age thing, right, that we always say, hey, coming of age. And I've probably come of age maybe 4 or 5 times. And I hope that I'll live long enough to come of age 4 or 5 more times, by the way. And what happened was, when I went to business school, did a Citibank carve out in fintech, and we patented the first bank-centric payment system, which was supposed to replace Visa and MasterCard, being the likes of PayPal and Venmo and the rest. But we were way too early. This is 2001. And when we finished that, I remember, I don't know what the crazy hair was, as they might say, but I all of a sudden switched and I said, I would like to do news. And I think the drive, sometimes you don't know the answer, but you've got this yearning. You and others understand that, you've seen it. Like, all of a sudden people just finish something and you think they're going to do something similar, but then they go out and they become, I don't know, they own a food stand, or they decide they want to become an astronaut, or what have you. And those moments, I think, are driven by those realizations that form you. And one of those realizations that formed me was a realization that I was the grandson of at least two illegal immigrants. And that says a lot about who they are and who I am.
Thank you for explaining that. And I appreciate the explanation and the story behind that, as well as the reason as an impetus for changing careers mid-career.
Yeah.
To do something that was like so much about your heart and so much about the why of that.
And part of that, Betsy, is, I as I pondered on it, because I remember I was again, during advertisements on set, and I was just looking off to the side. I was like, it was a little bit more than a Holy Hannah, put it that way. But Holy Hannah.
I don't actually know Holy Hannah. So when you say that, like, what the hell is Holy Hannah?
I'm making it up.
Okay. Like, holy moly, holy something.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? Let me put some words in there.
Thank you. All of those paraphrases are right on target. So I realized that why would he break the law? Lots of reasons there. 1882, China's Exclusion Act, first racist law ever signed in by Congress. We've never had a repeat by Congress. We have had something similar coming from the White House after that, which strangely, when I was covering the Muslim ban, I felt it in so many different ways at that moment.
Yeah.
I was working on a Saturday, 7 countries earmarked the quote unquote Muslim ban. And I felt like history was saying, you're the right person to be here tonight covering it. We were the first to cover it. We were the only ones that stayed on it. And I thought, if there's a bookend, and we have many in our lives, there's a bookend that was one of them, because of my understanding personally and of the community, of whatever that community might be, understanding what that meant that I could, I think, understand and tell the story better and ask the right questions and really feel the moment of what the Muslim ban meant, because I am the result of the first ever racist ban that was passed by Congress. And that's why my grandparents came here. And then you start to get into their head figuratively. Like, well, why did you do it? What were you thinking? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I did through a great team member of mine called Emil, as we were going through one, yes, that's right, is that we would work on these speeches, and he had a really good understanding of what the why, right? Of the why. And one of the storylines.
Just say, like, you actually had a better understanding of him having that understanding than I ever had of him. Just so you know. The reason why we met at that Starbucks on Barracks Row was not because I knew that about him. But I was like, okay, he's my brother.
Yes. So Emil is your brother, and good souls and good brains run in the family. I'll say that. Mm-hmm. And that's why we were able to sit at that time. And the reason why Betsy said Neil Itzib is because we joked, because this was our first off the record conversation, is that we had to have a code word for you. And so Neil Itzib was, for those of you who can guess, you get a free car, but it is.
Nope, don't tell people.
Okay, all right.
We will like have this some sort of guess.
Yes.
Whoever wins, whoever comes in first, or we'll figure this out, but whoever.
That's right. Okay, there we go. You'll get something, whoever figures that out.
Like undying admiration.
So in working with Emil on this, one of the thematics as we sat there and we talked about it was that, well, what would he want my grandfather and grandmother who came over for their children and their grandchildren and all of the further generations? And the answer was obvious. They didn't want them to be poor farmers. They came from one of the poorest places in China, and they were willing to risk. And America meant that. That's not new, as you know, Betsy, to any answer if you were to ask people that are deciding to break the law. Why are you doing it? So I don't have to live this way. My children don't, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So in a lot of the conversations that I may have where like this is, I will say, well, thank you, Grandpa. Because what would I say to him, right? Thank you, Grandpa, for coming to this country. I'm not glad you broke the law. I'm not glad there was a law. But I just want to tell you, thank you for coming here, because your grandson is a news anchor for a national network in the United States of America.
That's right.
I don't know. These are not perfect answers. I don't know.
You pinch yourself in that? What?
I do.
I
I do. Yeah. Yes.
It's nuts. It's nuts to think that you were like the first Asian American male to do. Was it news anchoring? Anchoring the news? Is it major news or just anchoring major news?
Cable. National cable. Yeah.
To me, that seems like part of the story here, which is part of this podcast. You know, role makers and role breakers, right? You are forging a path that other people haven't taken yet, who look like you, who look like us, who look like other folks. What were some of the challenges going into that world? You briefly talked about the fact of starting with business and then, a couple of different reasons why you want to go into journalism, but you've taken that and beyond anchoring and reporting on the news, you've also built a career as an author, as a filmmaker, as a speaker. You've really dug yourself into a lot of different arenas. So can you talk about any of that or all of that?
Yeah. Well, I was sitting at CNN headquarters when it was in Atlanta, and I got the call that I got the job.
Were you like, there are fireworks?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, yes. I was like,
can I do fireworks like this?
The fireworks are like this.
Oh, it doesn't like me.
Man, I think you have to turn it on. You have to turn it on. Oh, there you go.
Hey, congratulations. You got the job.
Exactly. Fireworks went off, and it was what I wanted. And what I said was, if I couldn't do it, then I would go back to business. And there's a reason why I felt that comfort, which I can explain in a second. But my fellow anchor, Melissa Long, looked over at me and said, "Richard, you know what this means?" And I was like, "What?" And she said exactly what you said. And I was like, "Dude, wow." She said, "Yeah, that's it. Your new job is a big deal." And it's like, "No, it's not." Yeah. and I thank her for seeing it, number one, because and she took notice of that. She didn't even pause. We had never talked about such issues before necessarily, but she just said it. And I think the reason about all of these different things, and they all have, I think, the same core, is that as my parents both were civil servants their entire lives, they did it. And I was always scratching my head like, why are you doing this stuff? We're making no money. We have to have food stamps. We're going to bed hungry. We don't have heat in the home. It was worse for my older brothers who they had to live with grandma, and nothing involved living with grandma, by the way. But they were all packed in this little, 2-bedroom apartment. My 2 brothers, my parents, and grandma and 3 sisters. You can imagine what I'm talking about, in Chinatown, San Francisco. And the answer became very clear. They had a passion to do something. My mom was always asked as a school teacher, "Hey, Rose, you're such a good teacher. Would you like to become a vice president at this nice middle school or this elementary school? Would you like to, move up over here? You can get a better raise." She said no. Even when she was asked for her last assignment before she retired, she decided to pick the worst by scoring and by violence elementary school in San Francisco. She didn't pick the nice one. And I was like, "Mom, why don't you take the vice president? You don't have to work as much. You can go to the nice school. We can not be hungry so much, right?" Yeah. My dad was a social worker. You know what I'm talking about. These are the worst paying jobs in San Francisco at that time. It's a good thing they're all getting better pay now. And they never said, "You have to do the same thing first." Yeah, same thing. And you shake my finger at me. They would never do that to any of us. But they lived the way they wanted us to live. So when it came time, these decisions, I think, just came through.
They actually lived these values that were less about the money that you made and the job that you had, and more about the impact on people's lives, is how I'm reading that.
That's right.
I'm reading what you've been doing in your world and your life around showcasing and making sure that voices that are less heard are lifted up, and that you are following stories that are, it's just been amazing to follow. I didn't realize that about your parents. I didn't realize that around their dedication to making the world a better place, even in a place when at that time and continues to be in San Francisco and continues to be in this world right now, doesn't really appreciate that necessarily. Doesn't appreciate it that by stature or by money or by visual aspect. That's amazing.
We weren't thinking amazing. Betsy and I, thank you for saying that.
It's amazing.
We were thinking, why are you doing this? Because it's not easy for us kids at home. And you know how it takes time?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I can say that, but I was a pretty, ornery little fella along the way, wondering why they were doing this. Because I was like, then my dad got struck by one of his clients. He
Literally punched
hit.
Like
he got hit because my dad would, his client set was included the Tenderloin of San Francisco, and those who were not getting proper assistance for emotional health and physical health would come in, and he would say, well, have you done these 4 things? Because we had, they had their lists, and one didn't. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't give you your assistance because you didn't do these things. It's basically getting sign off that you went for interviews. And he got struck and he passed out. He was sitting on the ground. And that, I think, was for him, after all those years, he was a pastor as well, and then a social worker. And then having that happen, nobody had to say it to him, but in his heart, I think he was conflicted. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, there's many things. Number one, don't hit people, obviously. And why would you hit my father? He's trying to do the right thing. And another thing I also thought is when he was starting to lose energy to stay in that work, I wondered how strong he was. How dare I? Who am I? He did this for decades, right? I can't even imagine having to work in these conditions and still come home and see your kids. He was absent, Betsy, many times for years. And my mom would say, hey, Stephen, in so many words. I wasn't obviously old enough, but I heard the stories. Stephen, come on, you got to buck up. This is a partnership. We're taking care of 4 children, right? I'm number 3. And I realized why. He stayed in the social work game, even though he was not emotionally equipped fully to handle it.
Yeah.
And at the time I was wondering I guess he's not that strong. Now I'm like, holy moly. Yes, he is. He was so strong. He wasn't built for it necessarily, but he did it because his heart stayed in it. And there are so many people out there like that. If we stop and we look and we give it time, that may look like they're disgruntled, upset, not equipped to handle these jobs, but they need to be the best equipped ever for those very jobs, instead of us making quick evaluations. So when I see the issues of difficult performance, low performance, or whatever the definitions are that are given to folks, we have to stop and think 2 or 3 times over about the full humanity that we're living and our ability, as well as our heart, to want to do it. There's ability, then there's our heart. And I know in some cases it's just not a good fit. And now I'm way off of this outside of my wheelhouse completely, but you just got me going about like what has driven me over the years. And it's the realization.
I do want to know because you've literally lived this lifestyle that was very traditional Asian American Pacific Islander for a long time. And then you've done this and you've dug your career into humanitarian and civil rights. And so it's fascinating to watch your career go from where it has gone and to also know you on a personal level throughout the last decade. Has it been a decade? Maybe?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. More than a decade
I'd say, I think it's 10 or 12 years, I think. That's why I said 13 earlier, but I think it's 10 or 12.
Yeah, no, I think it might be 13. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. And this is the first time this is happening in terms of this conversation, in terms of like a public conversation. This is the first time that this conversation is happening around why you've done particular things and why you have decided to do particular things. And I'm getting a sense that a lot of it has to do with, well, clearly you, but also your parents' upbringing around making a difference in the world and other people's lives.
Yeah, they without knowing it, Betsy, I guess they got their way. And also the realization of what my grandparents went through. All of these things are part of coming of age a couple different times. And in short, they wouldn't use these words. You know what I'm talking about. They wouldn't say they were fighting for equity.
Yeah.
But they were. Why did my mother pick for her last school, the lowest scoring school, the most in terms of violence?
She was one of the best teachers, right?
Yeah, and all of them did that. When you went to visit the teachers there, they were all like her. That's the run towards the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And same with my dad. He ran towards the fire. He wasn't my mom was a little bit more, adept at handling various stressful situations. My dad a little bit less so, but he still was an amazing person. But I think that's one of the messages I took away from that, Betsy, is, even though things aren't going well, don't run. Don't run. And I've seen it a couple different times in the last 8 to 12 years where, okay, that's not what I want, so I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to run away. And my thing is, all right, didn't get my way. I'm staying with it, though. I'm still going to sit down. And I think that's what I saw from them, is run towards the fire.
I love that. I know we're at time, so I want to close out with like 2 questions, which are, so I read somewhere that
oh, really?
somewhere that you hate pineapple on pizza. What would it take to get you to eat pineapple on pizza? I also dislike pineapple on pizza, but that was the question, and that was the easy question.
If you added more pepperoni or more sausage or more mushroom on it, I would eat it. I tend to not like sweet things. Like my mom used to throw in like cranberries in the salads and stuff. I'm like, Mom, why are you putting this stuff in? She grew up in LA, so she's used to fresh fruits and all this stuff. And so I've always been a savory person. And I'm glad that you do like it because it's good.
I do not like it, actually. It's not, it's not my favorite. No. Fresh pineapple is like very good. And my question for you to close this out is, you've talked about wanting the next part of your life to have 4 to 5 different career changes or potential changes in your world. Would any of those involve running for office?
Betsy Lynn.
Neil Itzem.
Neil Itzem. I would say, I love politics.
You can't roll it out. If you can't say no right now, then you don't roll it out.
It would be an honor to be able to fulfill one of those things that make us such an amazing place. And I laugh because there's a lot of things that I laugh about that I've done so far. And I ask that same question of others. And the laughter comes from, well, if you can't answer the question you ask, then should you be asking your question, right? And that's not always true. I mean, that's not like a rule to go by, but I do throw that in my brain once in a while. It would be an honor to do that, so long as it would be productive. And you know me, I love to get things done. And what a great time it would be to do it. I know that a lot of people would say it's not a great time, but if you have this idea of running towards the fire and trying to make some fixes, with you running at the same time would be great.
Thank you so much.